recording. Thank you so much, Patrick, for being here with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And the reason we're talking today is because the first issue of 2020 of the Journal for Psychotherapy Integration, which I think is out next month in March.
I believe so, yeah.
I think so, will be a special issue on supervisee perspectives of supervision processes. And you've actually helped with co-editing this with Jennifer Callahan, the editor-in-chief.
That's right. That's right.
So how did this come about, the idea of curating issues on supervisee perspectives?
Yeah, so it was really kind of Jennifer's brainchild. She does a lot of research, and myself as part of her lab, we do a lot of research on supervision processes. And one of the big gaps in the literature is really looking at supervisee perspectives. She is really aware that all different perspectives in this kind of triadic relationship between the supervisor, the supervisee, and the client are all really important. So she thought it would be a really, really good idea to put out a call and see if any young supervisees, emerging professionals, trainees would be interested in providing their perspectives and, you know, really adding something to the supervisor literature. And we just got an overwhelming responses, and she was gracious enough to bring me on. She knew I had done some ad hoc reviewer work for her in the past, and she knew I have an interest in kind of this area of research and in editing as well. So I was very excited and glad to be a part of this project.
Very cool. And you were telling me before we started recording, you actually got so many proposals that you were able to split it up into 2 different journals. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, we got 124 submissions total, which is a huge number. We were really surprised and happily overwhelmed by how many excellent submissions there were. And there were so many just really high quality submissions offering really unique perspectives that we did split it up across 2 journals. So one in this one coming out in SEPI is in JPI is our second journal, and the first one actually was published in the Training and Education in Professional Psychology a few months ago.
So how did you come about, I mean, being joyfully overwhelmed with the amount of proposals, how did you even select what to choose from?
That is a great question. We did a couple of rounds of reviews. So the first round was really reading and looking through every single submission. We really wanted to make sure that every submission that we got was given at least our time, Jennifer and I's time and attention. And then from there, we narrowed it kind of down into a couple different categories. We picked all of the ones that we thought were really, really great and could be published, which was still an overwhelming number. I don't remember exactly how many. Then from there, we started to kind of break everything down into different categories for perspectives. So perspectives from trainees who are people of color, or presenting on multicultural and cross-cultural issues in supervision, issues looking at kind of the different specific processes of supervision. Then from there, we narrowed it down into, you know, I think we sent it out to our external reviewers, who we actually did have both later career and seasoned kind of veterans of the reviewing process, and we recruited student reviewers as well to get their perspectives too. Then based on their recommendations, we picked our final set of articles. So
that's really cool. And I'm really wondering, maybe it's an unfair question, but given all that you went through in that process, what did you come out of it as maybe the key ideas or themes that emerge from looking to supervise these perspectives?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of key ideas and themes. I think one of them, the really one that jumped out for me as a current supervisee, is that it's really important to have an open dialogue and for the supervisor to create a safe space where the supervisee can share their opinions and views, not just of what's going on with them in the room with their clients, and being willing to share their weaknesses and places where they feel like their struggle, and even some, their failures, so they can grow, but also to discuss the relationship between themselves and their supervisor, and really have tough conversations about things that maybe the supervisee said that was uncomfortable, or just as importantly, what the supervisor said that made the supervisee uncomfortable, or was just kind of unhelpful in the moment. And those types of conversations are really what's going to help the relationship grow and help the supervisee grow into an even better professional.
Now, and I really want to know your opinion, because my reading of the literature is that both for clients in psychotherapy and supervisees in supervision, it's often quite hard to disclose those type of things. And I'm wondering if that came up also in the reviews that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a very common theme across many of our article submissions were about how supervisor self-disclosure in the supervision sessions helps supervisees feel comfortable to disclose themselves when they were appropriately done. And a lot of submissions that didn't talk about that supervisor self-disclosure directly had common threads of this was a risk the supervisee was taking. And depending on how the supervisor reacted, that discussion could go either way, and that relationship could either really strengthen or could really inhibit the supervisee from feeling comfortable sharing things that not only those tough discussions between supervisor and supervisee, but being vulnerable with somebody who's evaluating you and saying, hey, here's an area where I think I'm struggling, can you help me out? That was a very, very common thread of how tough it was.
So many important things you're saying there. And I'm wondering, you also mentioned the supervisor disclosure might be helpful or not. Can you give an example of what a supervisor disclosure would be?
Yeah, so it could be a lot of different things. So supervisor self-disclosure is the supervisor disclosing anything personal about themselves. Typically the most helpful things, at least according to the submissions and the articles we included, were relevant personal examples of the supervisor struggling with an issue that the supervisee was struggling with. So an example could be inappropriate remarks made by a client to a trainee clinician in like kind of a sexual nature. A supervisor kind of normalizing those remarks through the self-disclosure in an appropriate way, then working with the supervisee to tackle the issue in a way that makes the supervisee comfortable and protects their safety as well, is really, really helpful. And as we can see, that can also go the other way too, of a self-disclosure that's made that maybe isn't as helpful, could really hinder the supervisee's comfortability coming to the supervisor.
Are there any threads also on that end, like supervisors' disclosure that typically were not helpful?
Any typically not helpful. I think anything that it's very similar to self-disclosure from a clinician to a client. I think anything that takes the attention off of the supervisee and makes the attention about the supervisor can be pretty unhelpful, because then you're again losing the point of the supervisee-supervisor relationship, where you're trying to guide the supervisee as opposed to receive something for yourself as the supervisor.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've arrived at the whole batch of, supervisees' perspectives. You've already mentioned all the stuff that they do value, right? Like being open, authentic, able to take risks in the relationship of the supervision itself.
Yeah.
Also, like we've touched upon the possibility of harmful and even ineffective, inadequate supervision processes, right? And I believe it was even Michael Ellis who did some recent research on this. And I'm wondering how much of a thread that came up also in the work that you did, the idea of possibly harmful, inadequate supervision.
Mm. Yeah, unfortunately, it was about half the submissions were about um, unhelpful supervisor interactions. Not, luckily, not as many about outright harmful supervisor interactions, but there were still submissions about that. Um, and I think that really shows us a pretty common theme of a supervisor can believe they're being helpful and
Mhm.
have the best intentions at heart. But when they don't stop and think and listen to their supervisee, they may not realize how it's hindering the supervision process.
Right.
And I think that was the, talking about numbers, I think we have all had positive supervisor interactions and negative ones, even with the best supervisors. And it's those good supervisors who are able to, again, approach the relationship with a humble view and create a space where the supervisee can bring that up and say, hey, that didn't really work out for me, or hey, that really upset me. Can we have this discussion and really repair that? And it's the supervisors who, largely unintentionally, I think, don't create that safe space where you really kind of hit that roadblock, but then you get the butting of the heads
Yeah.
for the period of time where they're in that relationship. So.
It's perhaps not surprising that all we're talking seems to be more human things than supervision or psychotherapy things. Right?
Yes, yeah. I think these are really common human interactions, and I think these are true in therapeutic relationships, they're true in clinical supervision relationships, they're true in other supervisory relationships outside of the clinical realm, whether
Cultural,
it's
yeah.
research. Yeah, exactly. Cultural issues that come up. It's just kind of inherent in human interactions.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, definitely.
There's this whole other side then, because suppose we were doing supervision also to get more effective. And that's a whole other debate, right? And
Yes.
I was wondering how that came up as well, is the perceived impact of their supervision on their performance as therapists. Did that come up as a theme as well?
Absolutely. I think um, pretty much every article submission we have, and that's going to be published in this issue, touches on that either directly or indirectly in how the supervision process has improved the supervisee's either comfort in the room, which allows them to deliver interventions more effectively and be more present with their clients. Some of them mention specific cases and outcomes where their supervisor helped them see their client in a more helpful way, or on those kind of more unhelpful supervisory interactions, how that got in the way of them working with a particularly hard client. So there's definitely a big debate in the supervision literature on how effective it is for helping clinicians grow. But one thing that I think that Jennifer and I really try to emphasize in our introductions to the articles is supervision has been shown to be very effective at improving outcomes for the clients on the client side. And there's this kind of curve in how effective a trainee clinician becomes, and it kind of increases pretty rapidly during the training years, and then starts to plateau right after they get out of training, after supervision ends for most people. So that kind of shows that, yeah, supervision is absolutely having a positive effect on the effectiveness on our clinicians, and maybe should be, continued through consultation groups and continuing education after the formal education process is done.
You're touching on something I find really fascinating. I love this kind of literature, and I found it particularly funny and great that the introductory paper that you wrote for this series was also co-authored with Edward Watkins. And Edward Watkins, as I'm sure you know, published a review on 2011, kind of saying that there was no real evidence that supervision impacted client outcomes. So there's this huge debate still, I guess, on what actually seems to benefit supervisees to help better their clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason why that debate exists is because it's so hard methodologically to study the triadic relationship between supervision. You have supervisors and their supervisees are then nested statistically within each supervisor, and then you have the clients nested within both of them, and then you have to study this long stream of a whole bunch of different variables and how it affects it.
Yeah.
So the effects could be really small. A lot of supervision literature up until this point have been very small sample sizes. Anecdotally, I know it can be really hard to get supervisors to agree to participate in the research because it's an evaluation upon them, where supervisees are already being evaluated. So they're like, yeah, sure, this, what's one more? This is fine. So there are a bunch of different, methodological issues in this research. There isn't a lot of research out there on it either. I think Jennifer mentioned in our introduction that a 2008 study published said that about 10 supervision articles are published a year, which is not a lot. And so we just need more research. And that's really what we're hoping these two special issues will spur is, hey, this is really important. This is having real impact on supervisees, and they're seeing how it changes their clients. We need to continue to study this. We need to study this more, and maybe in some different ways.
I'm so happy. Congratulations again that you're taking the steps in that direction.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's.
I'm
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful. I think that's one of the best things about these two special issues from my point of view is not only getting the supervisee perspectives out there, but really how rich their experiences are and how many questions they pose and kind of challenges they pose to supervision researchers to say, hey, here's what we're seeing. Here's how we think we can improve, or some questions we need to answer. Let's go do it.
In a way, it reminds me a lot of how long we took to ask the client's perspective on psychotherapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Jennifer makes the direct parallel that supervision research is kind of in the 50s, 60s, 1950s or 1960s equivalent of outcome research. We weren't really asking the clients how they were doing. We were like, oh yeah, they're just doing fine.
Right.
And this is really the first time it's like, oh hey, we should ask the supervisees what's going on, because maybe it's not. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you one last thing, which is coming out of this experience. Any ideas about the important supervision research that still needs to be done? If you were to advise, potential supervision researchers, where should they focus on? What's interesting to move ahead with?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you my completely biased opinion because I can't give anything else, right? So I am very interested in multicultural research, particularly increasing the effectiveness of training we give to trainees from diverse backgrounds, kind of defined really broadly. And that's something that is starting to get more and more focus and exposure in the treatment outcome literature, how to reach this aspirational but ultimately probably unattainable goal of being multicultural competent clinicians. I think it's just as important to look at how to try to get to this aspirational goal of being multicultural competent supervisors as well. And something, a common thread that I saw of, again, we published it in TEP. A lot of the articles featured there focused on these multicultural and cross-cultural perspectives. But we had so many more submissions than we could ever hope to publish, focusing on this theme and those experiences. And as we grow as a profession and hopefully become more diverse in who works in our profession and continue to improve our outreach with diverse clientele, this is going to be really key to improving our outcomes, not just for clients of European origin and who are classically studied in our literature, but clients of various different backgrounds from different countries in different cultures. So for me, that's really where I think the push should go. And I think that is really, from my perspective, the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak. If we improve our cultural humility there and supervisors kind of improve their cultural humility, we should be able to model and teach our trainees how to be culturally humble in the room with our clients, which then will improve their outcomes and hopefully improve, even more people seeking
Yeah,
therapy and staying in therapy.
beautifully put. Patrick, I just want to say again, congratulations on this wonderful
Thank you
work.
so
Thank
much.
you for the work, because I understand how painstaking it must have been to go through it all. So it's really cool to see you excited about this. And again, congratulations on it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on and letting me share my excitement and giving me another avenue to kind of preach how important studying supervision is, not only for our trainees, but for our clients.